Hey guys, what is going on? Chris here with Shughead Gaming, bringing you my review for Immortal Legacy, the Jade Cipher, developed by Viva Games and releasing April 16th, 2019, exclusively for PSVR. This is selling for an estimated price of $20, and of course, that depends on your region. As usual, this game was reviewed on the PS4 Pro. Some mysteries are best left buried. Unearthing the disturbing truth behind an ancient Chinese legend in Immortal Legacy, the Jade Cipher, a hard-stopping mix of horror and first-person action, exclusive to PlayStation VR. Crack intricate environmental puzzles and unleash high-powered weapons on ruthless mercs and hordes of experimental abominations in your journey to uncover the truth behind an evil organization's grisly experiments. Originally titled Kill X, Immortal Legacy the Jade Cipher looks to want to be the Uncharted of PSVR, but does this Sony Published title pull it off? Let's find out. As always guys, if you like this video, please hit that like button, and if you'd like to see more PSVR content from me, please consider subscribing, and for video updates, hit that bell icon. And remember, if you want more PSVR news and info, check Shughead Gaming out on Twitter and Facebook. As always, let's kick this review off with a look at graphics. Published by Sony themselves and in development for almost 3 years, Immortal Legacy the Jade Cipher is at most times actually pretty stunning in the headset. The earlier stages with wide open spaces of cliff walls and great elevation are delivered with long draw distances and very sharp textures. With no mention of a pro patch, these opening stages are easily on par with the likes of Evasion and Eden Tomorrow when comparing sharpness and draw distance. Even more impressive is that even with these open spaces, the game pulls off some excellent ambient occlusion lighting effects, in addition to some impressive particle effects, with the hurricane-like winds being a real standout. Later stages see you spending most of your time in the dark and sinister-feeling cave systems. It is here that the game's lighting engine really shines, as you are often draped in darkness, with only your flashlight and guns for company. Shadows stretch across entire spaces while you trek further and further into the nether of the island's secrets, and never failed to impress me with what Viva Games had managed to pull off on the dated PS4 hardware. Weapon models are also fantastically modeled and true to their real-life counterparts. They aren't fully animated, but visually come off even more impressive than the gun models found in Firewall Zero Hour, with overall sharper visuals free of much of the blurriness that plagues similar games. Unfortunately, it's not all good news. While impressive in overall scope, level textures are at times underwhelming or too obviously cherry-picked, exampled well when looking at lower rock faces with increased detail, yet having areas right above them coming off significantly underdeveloped. While concessions obviously needed to be made given the game's ambitions, it was still noticeable. Character animations, while not cringeworthy, are also not first-rate and do stand out as a sore spot when seen in comparison to the game's other visual high points. In addition, lip sync is way out, but that's to be expected given the Asian-based development. And speaking of character animations, I am a huge fan of having a rendered body in VR, but what is it with the arms seemingly coming out of my neck? This was obviously a result of the developer not rendering the rest of the body, including the shoulders, but I honestly might have preferred the floating hand situation instead. All in all, not AAA VR visuals, but still a significant achievement and a nice surprise we didn't see coming. Sound is up next.
These guys have been here a while. No wonder they're losing it. No uniforms. Not military. Mercs?
Small indie and specifically Asian-based studios have not had the best track record when it comes to the audio side of their PSVR offerings. Often the result has been cheesy music, cringeworthy dialogue, and generic sound effects. Well, wasn't I surprised when jumping into Immortal Legacy only to be greeted by a competent orchestral score with some nice tribal undertones, decent sounding weapons, and the lead character voiced by none other than famed voice actor Doug Cockle. You may not know that name, but you know the voice, with his Solid Snake-esque portrayal of Geralt from the Witcher series. Voice acting is across the board fairly competent, but having your inner monologue come across from this pedigree of voice actor is not something we're used to hearing in VR games that just randomly hit the PSN store. Like I said, weapon sounds are actually very decent. Some fare better than others, and they certainly aren't first-rate, but they did sound relatively authentic and helped make gunplay a satisfying part of the game. World sounds are also handled with a fairly high level of competence, nicely checking off all the boxes of required effects. Nothing here stands out as incredible, but then nothing jumps out as horrible either. It's all just okay. The 3D sound mix can be a little spotty at times, with certain environmental effects noticeably jumping from one ear to the other, but then in the next moment, incredibly effective. Like the visuals, a bit of a mixed bag here, but overall, a lot more done right than not. And that brings us to gameplay. Well, let's get this out of the way. Regardless of the positives and negatives I will soon get into here, Immortal Legacy the Jade Cipher is probably the closest thing this generation of PSVR hardware will get to an Uncharted game. Gunplay throughout mountaintop locales against hired guns? Check. Ancient puzzles to solve? Check. Rock climbing? Check. Tomb exploration? Rare magical artifact? Check, check, check. In fact, the only thing we are missing is Nolan North to bring the comedic dialogue.
You are delusional.
Now, I'm not saying this is nearly on par with the quality of the Uncharted series, but it's hard not to see and at times appreciate the similarities. At around 5 hours in length, the campaign is split into two primary parts, that of the wide open vistas of the mountain passes and the dark and ominous cave sections. Your first third will be spent topside and is primarily all about gunplay against a bunch of mercs with a little bit of rock climbing thrown in for good measure. An epic boss fight, Resident Evil style, and then below you go for the remainder of the game. Once in the cave system, things get a bit more varied as we see the introduction of some light puzzle mechanics and a quick change of direction from gun-toting mercs to more of the monster variety, as you will now spend most of your time also battling the dark and the creepiness of what you can't see coming. Not helped by the introduction of branching paths and dead ends, the latter of which could be very frustrating at times due to the very slow movement speed. I can't say that I cared at all about the story, and all these gameplay elements didn't always come together as well as I would have hoped, but I can honestly say I was never bored. And that brings me to my one giant complaint and the area of which the game really drops the ball in: the controls. With mandatory move controls, the devs seem determined to deliver dual-wielding gameplay on PSVR, regardless of what compromises needed to be made. I can see what they are going for, I really can, attempting to make it so we didn't have to wave one move around to strafe and walk backwards, instead allowing us to move and still shoot with both hands freely. The result is a very unintuitive control scheme that has left and right split across two moves. Walk and run being done by pushing either one or both move buttons. Walking backwards and strafing are put to the face buttons, and inventory control for each hand is done by a single button that scrolls through everything in that hand's limited inventory. And while I did slowly get accustomed to it, and I did enjoy being able to strafe with both hands firing, the ends do not justify the means. The end result was switching guns trying to turn, an inventory system that made it so I had to scroll through multiple items just to heal, an awkward backward motion, the inability to run and turn at the same time, and just a general awkwardness to all things related to movement in gunplay. Other poor control choices like the inability to just holster a single weapon, key artifacts taking up inventory slots for the whole game, and the frustratingly slow movement speed made playing Immortal Legacy much more of a chore than it needed to be. When in gunplay, the dumb AI and poor control options often ended with me just standing in the open making sure I killed them first, as moving to cover was just too painful. We all know the struggle of full movement games with the stickless moves, but sticking to the PSVR standard most games have adopted, or at least giving us the option to switch to it, would have been far wiser. In fact, it's a testament to the things the game does right that despite all these control issues, I still had fun. However, one unique control choice did get a thumbs up. When using two-handed rifles, you are required to grab the gun with both moves, but then can drop one hand to free it up. This broke the immersion of holding a gun slightly, but added the benefit of allowing me to free up a hand as well as to avoid any tracking issues of having two moves close together and in line with each other, often resulting in a bad time in PSVR land. Looking on the brighter side of things, gunplay was still pretty fun, and I enjoyed the wide variety of guns, sights worked well across the board, and well, dual wielding is rarely not fun. Comparisons to Killing Floor Incursion and Arizona Sunshine are obvious here and fairly so. Arizona with its aim support is the better playing of the two, but campaign versus campaign and overall quality, Immortal Legacy comes off ahead. When looking at Killing Floor, another game I loved but had issues with, I have to say they are about even with an even amount of pros and cons. Immortal Legacy, as I previously mentioned, is controlled by two moves only. Aim support would of course been awesome, and honestly a surprising absence considering Sony is the publisher of this game. That being said, the game's development was started far before the aim was a thing, and perhaps foregoing all the two-handed aspects was simply not feasible. Instead, I'm looking at the upcoming 3D rudder, which would be a perfect fit to take over all movement controls, drastically increasing the game's fun factor. Immortal Legacy does support click turning and smooth turning, but be warned the smooth turning here is horribly implemented, with strong baked-in blinders and a noticeable drop in frames. I'm not a fan of click turning, but trust me when I say it's the better choice. Motion sickness could be an issue for some as there's no teleport option, however the walking speed is rather slow so it could be manageable. Immortal Legacy can be played either sitting or standing with a moderate amount of room recommended. And finally, that brings us to fun factor and my final review. Immortal Legacy: The Jade Cipher is a frustrating title, due largely in part that it does so much right, yet really shits the bed on the control side of things, dampening the overall experience. That being said, despite its issues, I still really enjoyed it, due largely in part to the adventure that I felt I was on and the fantastic VR visuals. As you know, I hate number rating scales and instead rate games on a basis of buy, wait for a sale, or burn it to the ground. At $20 US, this game is priced probably just right and ensures you will get your money's worth. That being said, if you aren't willing to work with the controls and just deal, this is not the game for you. For those that really enjoyed Killing Floor Incursion despite the busyness of those controls, I think this is an absolute must-buy for you. This doesn't have that game's co-op, and its controls aren't the same, but if that's the type of game you like in VR, then you've also been waiting a long time for another one like it, and this will make you smile. Anyways guys, that's it for me. If you liked this video, please hit that like button, and if you'd like to see more PSVR content from me, please consider subscribing, and for video updates, hit that bell icon. I'll catch you guys on my next video.